Well, you guys spoke and I listened, and we're going to do a waterbrush sketch of a landscape today. Reese and I were just talking about how overwhelming the response was to the sketch video I did a couple weeks ago on a couple of portraits. And just a ton of you wanted to see that applied to landscape, and so that's what we're going to do today. I pulled out a travel photo and one of my little sketchbooks, and we're going to go sketch with this bad boy right here. All right, let's get the old specs on right here. So there's not a whole lot about this process I can say that I haven't said. I'll encourage you to go and check the link out below if you haven't seen it already, of the video that I did to sort of kick this process off on YouTube. It's really nothing earth-shattering. It certainly is not new. I think oil painters are probably more known for doing this sort of thing. Here's my reference, by the way. And this is a cypress tree that I just thought was really cool. And I want to capture an impression of that and the cypress knees that are surrounding it and the palm fronds that kind of go behind it, which offered some very nice contrast. So we're just going to take that section of the scene and draw it out. And I'm starting out, as I've mentioned before in this process, with just very, very light color. Like you might draw with a pencil, like a light pencil, an H or a 2H, or just not putting down much pressure. And I'm placing all the elements where I want them to go, and the elements that I want in there, the main elements. So this just be again, just a corner of that scene. A little piece of it. All right, let's take a look at what I'm using today. This is my Holbein gouache palette. Now, usually what I do for the purposes of sketching with a fine point is I mix up a bunch of cool color and a bunch of warm color. This is sort of a gray, green, brown, muddy color, but when you lighten it up, it works really well. And then cool, and you can see a little bits of color in here where I will tint it. And the important part is, or at least what I think the important part is getting an area set aside where you can really, really lighten that color. Because when I start off extremely light. To me, that's one of the joys of using this method. Putting down very light color, in some cases even lighter than that, because if I could put it down so light that you wouldn't be able to see it on camera. So I'll have a nice little puddle of water in each of these areas where I can go to the very lightest tint or back off into a darker tint. I might do a stroke like this, which would be the equivalent of putting down pencil on the side of your lead. And as I decide more on where my strokes need to be, make them gradually darker. It's very simple. It's pretty much the same as using a pencil. You bear down harder where you want it darker, maybe switch leads to, a 2B or a 4B, so on and so forth. Now, in today's example, I'm going to go pretty far with the pencil analogy, and that's just because I want to. But in reality, at any point, you can just go from penciling, or what feels like penciling, to just painting in an area. So it's a very versatile process, and that's what I love about it and why I'm exploring it so much. There's no rhyme or reason necessarily to the gouache. It works exactly the same as the watercolor. And I will, again, as I did in the portrait sketch episode, I will again link to the video where I went more fully into explaining how I use this process. It's usually very transparent, very faint, and a buildup. The only difference here is gouache lifts a little bit easier, so I can come back in and re-wet it a little bit better. That may have some advantages. And if I want to paint a few opaque parts in there, I have it ready at hand. And again, the brush I'm using is this fine point Derwent. It's pretty much the finest point water brush that I've been able to find. If there is another one out there like it, I don't have it, but I like this fine point Derwent for that purpose. And here you'll see as I get more of the details in, start defining those edges and the elements that I want in the painting or in the sketch. And they'll gradually get darker, once again, very much as you would do with a pencil. And I'm just going for an impression here, as I do in most of my pieces, but especially here. For instance, the reflection is going to be very sketchy, not so mirror-like as you see in the photo reference. I'm really excited to try this on plein air. While I'm using it fairly tightly and fairly extensively here, I think it's just a great way to quickly sketch something in. And you may ask, well, why do this? If it's so much like pencil, why not just use a pencil? Well, of course you could. I think the thing I love about it the most is it still, while it approximates a pencil-like process, it still looks very much like watercolor. And it dovetails well with any painting process or effects you might add to it. All right, I thought I would show you where this whole process idea started. Way back, I think it was 2019, I participated in the 30-30 Direct Watercolor Challenge. 30 watercolors in 30 days, and you had to paint directly on your paper or sketchbook. No pre-drawing, no pre-anything. So I started experimenting with drawing in watercolor as I painted, and this was the very first one I did. I think I actually used a rigger rather than a waterbrush. So it was, and here was the second one. And it worked out pretty well. As I was doing it, I thought, oh, this has some possibilities. So again, I will put a video below where I showed some more sketchbook work with this process and how I kind of tried to develop it and bring it along. Here was, not this was a shadow study, a little doodle I did, but these two here, I copied from another artist for the purpose of, he drew trees a little differently than I did, and I like that. I just kind of wanted to study his style. But this was done in the Waterbrush sketch method. You can see it's very monochromatic. This up here is a good example of how at any point you can stop the drawing process. I think I used a water brush with a little bit thicker point, but at any point you can stop the drawing process and actually go to more broad washes. And I've just gotten more and more to where I'm using the pre-sketching method, actually using watercolor and a water brush. So back to today's demo. Now, I'm pretty happy with that scene over there. I thought what I would do is just real quickly sketch in some cypress knees, some close-ups of some cypress knees. This sort of is a little inset in the corner. This was not in that photo reference. This was in another photo reference. There it is. But I wanted to do this fast, just to kind of see how quickly, less deliberately I could do this. And you can do it very quickly. Very loosely if you want to. All right, and I'm going to end just by tweaking the original drawing, adding a few more extra layers of contrast and sort of extending that background. And I'm really happy with the way this has turned out. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you got some inspiration from this. Maybe it's a process you want to try. Thank you so much, patrons, for your support of this channel. We'll see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.